You can take yourself out of that alarm state and live a life free of anxiety. I'm Sally Guthrie, and I became an RTT therapist almost 5 years ago now, in the very beginning with Marisa. And I was at a really interesting place in my life. I had been divorced 5 years prior, and I was very broken and very busy working a lot of different jobs, working to provide for my two girls at the time. I had always been fascinated with the mind, and my mother was a therapist, and she actually had a method very, very similar to Marissa's method, but it was very religious, and I wanted to understand a way to separate that to get the results that she could get. And then when I found Marisa, I knew that it was a match. And in the beginning, we actually had to be interviewed by Marisa to work with her, and that was a beautiful process. And I came to London. I had to get a big fat loan to do it, and it was very scary to make that happen at the time, but I felt intuitively that that was the right thing for me. And thank goodness I was right, because it totally, totally changed my life in the way that I moved forward. So in learning RTT, not only did I learn and free myself of many of my own belief structures and ways of being that were no longer serving me, I now get to help, and have done for the past 5 years, literally thousands of people who come to me to find freedom from the limitations that they hold, and understanding that they're actually belief structures that we hold that limit us and don't serve us. I grew up with therapy. My mother was a therapist, and I loved that she was able to help people find amazing freedom. And I've always been fascinated with the mind, and I've studied the mind and lots of different things. I've resisted becoming a therapist. I was always one of those people that people said, oh, you should be a therapist, or aren't you a therapist? And I resisted it so much. I didn't want to be my mother. My mother actually died when I was 21. And I still resisted it for many, many years. I was 40 when I studied RTT, and just letting myself naturally fall into something that I knew deep within my being was a part of my journey. There's a sense of calling and a knowing deep within us when we know that we're actually here to truly help other people, to help other people in a deep and powerful way, and to help others find freedom and release and joy and love and connection. And when that is in you, really in you, you can only deny it for so long until it gets really, really loud. And fortunately for me, when it got really loud, the universe presented me with Marisa, and then the beautiful tools that she shared with me in order to be able to facilitate that. It would be foolish, unless you were very, very financially secure, just to go pull the plug on your current role. I always advise people to do it in incremental steps, if they can, if that's possible for them, in just slowly building your practice and slowly easing off the other work that you do to support yourself, if that's where you're at. If you have the luxury of just being able to, then go for it. But moving from the certainty, and I just wrote a chapter in a book today about certainty, certainty being an illusion anyway, but certainty of having secure work in the corporate world or in any world at all, moving from that into something that you absolutely love is, one, very, very terrifying, but two, the most rewarding thing you will ever do. But my recommendation is to stagger that transition. Start working on the side and build it up until you feel that you're ready to rip that Band-Aid off and completely dive in. Over the years using RTT for myself, as well as my clients, and also actually working with other RTT therapists to clear my own stuff. I have let go of many different programs that I had been carrying that didn't serve me. One that comes to mind was a really non-beneficial money program that I had running for a long time. And through my work and through letting go of those layers, I've absolutely shifted that. And because obviously it was very hard for me financially, and whilst you're holding money blocks, it's always going to be hard for you financially. But to have moved through that and progressed forward, and of course then that then allowed my business to flourish when I let go of my own blocks around that. And I do charge quite a lot, but I feel very comfortable and confident in that, comfortable and confident in the results that my clients get in order to charge what I charge. And for me, mostly I work with my clients just once. We do just one session. 9 times out of 10, we do just one session to work on any one particular issue. Clients do come back. Sometimes I had a client just come back 4 years later for another issue that she wanted to address, but it was something else entirely. So I love that so quickly we can help people move through and let go of and totally transform their own lives in the same way that I've transformed mine, and continue to do so, because we continue to learn and see as different things come up and we move through life and into different circumstances and understandings. The number one negative belief, and Marisa always talks about it herself, is the I'm not enough. But there's many variations of what that is. I'm not enough because of XYZ. And so everybody has their own little spin on it. But the actual connection to self is what is the most limiting. The way we actually perceive who we are is the limiting structure that holds us back. And most of us don't see ourselves as valuable or worthy. The other is a sense of belonging. I don't belong, I'm different. All of these different structures come into play. But when we come to a point, and this is one of my most precious parts of my work, is to bring a client to a space, and really you're just facilitating that space for them to actually see themselves for the very first time, to truly see themselves, to truly see and feel into their value, and to love what they see, and to actually fall in love with who they are in that moment. And that connection is the sweetest, most divine experience, and it's lasting. That's not something that you just do and it's gone. It is then there and it is permanent, and then we can build on what that is and build into our self-worth. And when we believe in ourselves, then we're actually able to do anything. When we don't, it's very, very hard. Anxiety, though, for me is the most unnecessary struggle that people have. And it is so common and so prevalent in everybody, and especially right now that the world's gone mad, it's escalated completely. But primarily, I mean, I work with anyone with anxiety, but primarily I love to work with teenagers, because working with teenagers to help them find freedom from that, you know that you're changing the trajectory of their life, that they're then going to be set in a different place to move forward, and to empower a young person in who they are, to believe in themselves, to move forward, and to be able to move forward without anxiety is, it's life-changing. So anxiety, most definitely, I work with all of the time. But I've worked with so many things, and I'm always blown away when people come with physical issues and physical ailments, and they can be random and obscure things. And it's fascinating to pull apart and understand how it's serving the person, because there's always a part of the mind that's believing it's beneficial in some way. When you pull it apart and look at it and see where it came from in the original belief, and people find that freedom and release, but then more than that, find release from the physical ailment. The structures around anxiety is actually very simple. Anybody with anxiety already knows and understands that it is their body responding to a threat. And it is just that the mind is perceiving a threat that is not there. is not there. And when you can actually flip that in the mind to bring balance to what it is that the person is actually observing, so that then their body is no longer responding in threat, then peace and calm can absolutely be found. And again, it always comes back to the way the person sees and perceives themselves in the world. And safety is one of our number one primal needs, and the mind is always going to be looking out for danger, and it does that in a supercharged way. And so when you can actually bring it back to be looking at reality in truth rather than in this perceived structure, anxiety is just the mind responding in a way that was once beneficial but is not beneficial now. It is not beneficial in the here and the now. And we can be responding in an anxious way when there is no threat at all. It is just a perceived threat. And so when we can actually come back into a space of truth and understand that I am safe, and it's really easy to say that. And when someone's suffering with anxiety, it seems impossible that you could find that space. But when you actually do the work and understand how the anxiety is serving and unpack what that is, then you're able to find freedom from it. Anxiety is given like a diagnosis in mainstream medicine and considered to be a disease, a dysfunction in somebody, some kind of imbalance. And all it is the mind responding in a particular way to a perceived threat. And it absolutely can. I've literally seen it myself thousands of times with my clients. It can be reversed. You can take yourself out of that alarm state and live a life free of anxiety. Actually, one of my very first clients was an anxiety client, which angled me into that direction a little bit as well, because her results from being actually anxiety ridden, like couldn't go to the grocery store without having a panic attack, that kind of level anxiety, we did the work, and she was then amazed that she could just relax and be present, and she could go to school pickup and drop off without having a panic attack, no longer concerned. Her anxiety was based around how others perceived her, and went back to obviously something that she learned when she was very young. But when you switch that perception, then the anxiety is no longer required. And she very loudly shouts from the rooftops, actually, that when you change that, then you live completely differently. And she was astounded that this is how everybody else lives. She didn't even know it was possible. It absolutely is possible. And I understand that so many believe that it's not, because that's what we've been told, but we've been told a lot of things that aren't necessarily true. And when something can't be fixed with a pill, it goes into that other basket. And the truth is, medication can be helpful sometimes, but it is not always the solution. And in my experience with my clients, it's a very short-term solution, because the anxiety comes back because the root cause isn't dealt with. And when you get to the root cause, you can alter then your complete experience of everything. I worked with two clients that come to mind that really are my deepest privilege and joy to have shared with. One, an amazing man in his 80s, late 80s, a very, very successful businessman, so successful. And he came to me, and, as I was saying, the beauty of the work is to connect a person to themselves, to let them see themselves, to let them feel their value. And so this man in his late 80s had never truly met or felt or connected to himself on that level, had never actually seen and understood his value. His value was always placed outside of himself in everything that he did and achieved. And my goodness, he had done a lot of things. But to be able to take him to that place at the end of his life was truly such a privilege. And he actually died shortly after our session. And it was just such, I mean, every session you hold in your heart, it is amazing that every session can be so meaningful. But that, for me to have had and shared that experience with him, was powerful. My other big privilege. It's always a privilege when people that you actually know come to you, and that's not standard in therapy, to work with people that you know or people that you're close to. But with this type of therapy, it is actually possible if the person wants it and obviously feels safe, and the match is right. So my older daughter, who is now 16, and normally it wouldn't be a fit, and with my other daughter it certainly would not be a fit to work with her, but my older daughter came to me and she did a beautiful little testimonial that you can find somewhere as well. But she was really struggling with anxiety, and she put it on me like big, you help everybody else with their anxiety, why won't you help me? And so I sat with her and we did a session, and it was the most beautiful experience for both of us to sit and move through that together. And of course, as the mother, I featured in the session, and for her to actually be able to articulate and see that it was, my responses to her in her learning moments, where she formed the beliefs around the anxiety, for her to be able to actually look at and see that my responses were about me, not about her, and to find the freedom from that for herself was so powerful. And the anxiety she had was around public transport, and she no longer has that. My goodness, I can't keep her at home anymore. She's gone, she's off, she's going. So those two in particular were so precious, but it is, there are countless moments and experiences with people, and to be able to share that is a deeply profound and moving experience every single time. There are no there are no sessions that don't feel amazing and don't take someone to an amazing place of deep understanding for themselves. The adage, know thyself, is so powerful and so true. And until we start to truly look at the unconscious belief systems and structures that we hold, we will never actually move through into the potential of life, what life has to offer us. And it's powerful. When I studied ITT, it was, I had to go to Europe for 6 weeks in order to do it. It was just the way it was structured then. And so after getting a massive loan and putting it all on the line and taking my 2 little girls with me, fortunately my sister lives in Europe and was able to look after them while I was actually studying. The position I was in when I studied, I was in a very difficult financial position, and I was working 4 different jobs. I was even ironing clothes when my girls were sleeping. I was doing everything that I could to not go back to the corporate world and to stay present with my children. But the reality was I was so tired and really not incredibly present with my children. I was exhausted and completely overwhelmed. And so coming back from my training, it took a little while, but I slowly let go of my other positions that I was working. And in about 6 months, I was working only doing RTT. I came back, I started straight away and built my practice. And since then, for almost 5 years now, I have only done RTT, and it allows me to have a life of absolute freedom. I work when I want, where I want. Currently, I'm only working online, so literally where I want. I get to create and do and be absolutely present for my children now, who are now teenagers and don't need quite as much from me anymore. but I am able to live the life, my life is actually unrecognizable as to what it was before I did the RTT training. And since RTT, I've studied other things as well and added beautiful things to what I do. But for me, RTT was definitely the catalyst for a huge shift in the way that I live my life and my own personal freedom. All of the beautiful changes that have happened in my life from making the choice to study RTT. They're countless and all so important, but I think being able to actually work and know that what you do is meaningful, to know that to absolutely love what you do, but to feel like every single time you work with a person, it's such a deep privilege and pleasure. And that's my job. And for me, that's wild and it blows my mind. And every now and then, worthiness things creep in of how did I get so lucky? And it just catapults me into gratitude of, I feel so fortunate and blessed to be able to do this work and to facilitate the freedom of others. Given I was fortunate enough to be one of the very first people personally trained by Marisa, that allows me the privilege of being one of the most experienced therapists in RTT. And as a result, I get a lot of therapists, RTT and other modalities, who actually come to me to work through their own issues and work. And that is a privilege and an honor to be able to move through with other therapists. But what I also know, and what always comes up for therapists, and I get also a lot of people who are looking at studying RTT, they're looking at studying RTT and they want to experience it for themselves first to see if it works, just to check the box. And often, like with every single client, it comes back to whether a person thinks they can do it. Oh, I can't do it the way you do it. I can't do it the way Marisa does it. I'm never going to be good enough. It's the same old thing that comes through. And the truth is, the beauty of this method is the method itself is solid. You learn the method and trust the method. And this is what I always say to therapists who come to me with questions. Once you've learned the method, there's nothing that you need to know. There's nothing that you need to figure out. The client themselves holds all the answers. You can't know what is true for them. You just work through the method, trust the method, use the tools that you've been given, and the answers will come. The freedom is all already within the client. You can just trust what you have learned, not feeling like you need to have the answers. And I think that's where a lot of therapists come unstuck, because they try to figure it out for the client. And that's not our job. It's our job to hold space. It's our job to use the tools that we have and allow the processes to happen. So that's kind of one of the number one things that comes up, whether it's for a potential person wanting to study RTT, or even somebody who has studied and is a little unsure of where they're at and where to go. My biggest advice is to trust, and to trust that you will present and offer RTT your way, with your voice being the most important. You don't need to be like Marisa or like me or like any other RTT therapist or any type of anyone in any arena, whether you're looking at social media or whatever it is. Just be you. Your clients will be drawn to you because of you, and you can trust the method. A massive thing that I have learned throughout my journey as a therapist, my journey as a human, is that I am, you are, we are, the moment is, the experience is, life is perfect imperfection. And really embodying that, really being okay with that, and seeing and knowing that whether I'm radiant and nailing it and, presenting to hundreds of people and having an epic, glorious moment, or whether I'm having a cry broken on the bathroom floor, I am perfect imperfection. The moment is perfect imperfection. So learning this has allowed absolute safety in my life. Learning this has allowed me to be a therapist that can hold space without expectation of myself, without expectation of the client, to actually truly be able to relax and allow. And we can relax and allow when we believe in our perfect imperfection. We don't need to be anything else. I'm as, messy as everybody else is. We're all the same. It's a level playing field. There is nobody more amazing or less amazing. We are all perfect imperfection.